This morning in Sabbath school, I made a comment about the importance of understanding the sanctuary and what Christ is doing today in the most holy place. I mentioned a statement in the Great Controversy, and I'd like to read it to you. In this Great Controversy, this one right here, it's on page 325, but in the normal Great Controversy book, the page is totally different. It's in the chapter called Facing Life's Record. It says this: the subject of the sanctuary and the investigative judgment should be clearly understood by the people of God. All need a knowledge for themselves of the position and work of their great high priest. Otherwise, it will be impossible for them to exercise the faith which is essential at this time, or to occupy the position which God designs them to fill. How important that every mind contemplate the solemn scene when the judgment shall sit and the book shall be opened. When with Daniel every individual must stand in his lot at the end of the days. All who have received the light upon these subjects are to bear testimony of the great truths which God has committed to them.
That's good. Page 488 in the regular.
488 in the regular Great Controversy. All right, thank you, Brother Gidding. Well, we're going to look this morning in Daniel chapter 5. Break from our study somewhat on the sanctuary and the investigative judgment, but in some ways we're not breaking, as we will see. As we noticed from our reading this morning on Belshazzar, there's a problem. It wasn't because he used the sacred vessels from God's temple for drunkenness. It wasn't because he was a profane and immoral wretch. It wasn't because Cyrus was encamped just outside his walls. None of these things caused the downfall of the golden kingdom of Babylon. It was because Belshazzar forgot something. You see, folk, as a young boy, Belshazzar had stood at the palace, in the palace, and had looked out over the fields that were owned by royalty, by his family. And as a young man, Belshazzar looked out, and he saw a very strange-looking individual. And this individual's fingernails were looking like claws, and the hair on that individual was growing very, very long. And instead of the individual walking around on his feet, the individual was actually crawling on the ground. And Belshazzar didn't recognize who the person was out in the field there at the royal palace, but he was told that that was his grandfather. That was his grandfather. And so Belshazzar, in 553 BC, about 9 years after his grandfather Nebuchadnezzar had died, Belshazzar became the king, the co-king of the kingdom of Babylon. His father Nabonidus was ruler of the kingdom, but Nabonidus was basically in retirement. and Belshazzar was left to run the kingdom of Babylon. Daniel chapter 5, verses 1 and 2, we read about the bad boy Belshazzar. Belshazzar the king made a great feast to 1,000 of his lords. He drank wine before the 1,000. While he tasted the wine, he commanded to bring the golden and silver vessels which his father Nebuchadnezzar had taken out of the temple, which was in Jerusalem. The king and his princes, his wives and his concubines might drink therein. You know, folk, there's always danger. There's always danger when we start messing around with stuff that makes us think crazy. And that's what wine does. It makes us think crazy. You know what's interesting? I know there's a statement in the Spirit of Prophecy where Ellen White says that when we mix at our meals, when we drink cow milk, and we mix that with sweets, that it has the same effect on the human mind as does alcohol. So folk, we don't want to be mixing sweets and milk. We shouldn't be drinking cow's milk anyway because of all the mucus that's left in the cow's milk today. But folk, it has the same effect on the mind as does alcohol. So when people start drinking alcohol, they start doing dumb things. And Nebuchadnezzar did a dumb thing. The Bible says he brought the golden vessels that were taken out of the temple of the house of God, which was at Jerusalem. And the king and his princes, his wives, and his concubines drank in them. They drank wine and praised the gods of gold and of silver, of brass, of iron, of wood, and of stone. Now, folk, these golden goblets or golden vessels, Nebuchadnezzar, Belshazzar's grandpa, had taken them out of the house of God when he invaded Jerusalem in 597 BC. Actually, he invaded 3 times. But in 597, he took all these golden goblets out of the temple in Jerusalem. So Babylon began to tamper with the sanctuary, began to fool around with what God had established for people to understand the plan of salvation. And it was very, very serious. You don't mess with the sanctuary of God. Folk, we just read this morning in Great Controversy, we have got to understand what the sanctuary is teaching. We have seen for the last 60 years within Seventh-day Adventism, people assaulting the sanctuary service, saying that atonement is finished at the cross. This assault on the sanctuary of God has been going on for centuries. For centuries. Daniel chapter 8. In Daniel chapter 8, we read about a little horn power that represents pagan and papal Rome. Daniel chapter 8 and verse 11, the Bible says, he magnified himself even to the prince of the host. Now the prince, of course, is Christ. Pagan and the papal power, the Roman Catholic Church, they magnified themselves against Christ. The papacy is still doing that today. By him the daily was taken away, and the place of his sanctuary was cast down. Folk, it's a fearful thing. It is a fearful thing to mess with the sanctuary of God. Belshazzar did it. Why? Because he forgot. He forgot how merciful and how kind God had been to his grandfather. And he started messing with the sanctuary and some of the goblets. And the end was about to fall. The party was about to be crashed on Belshazzar. Belshazzar played with the sacred cups. He was destroyed. Uzzah touched the Ark of the Covenant and was cut down on the spot. You remember in the days of David, prior to that actually, when the ark had been taken in the days of Eli the priest, the Philistines had taken it into their country. It had remained there for quite a while. Then it was brought back to Israel. It was kept in the home of, I don't remember the guy's name, it was Uzzah's father, probably first his grandfather, then to his father. And David, then wanting to build the temple in Jerusalem, he said, I want the Ark of the Covenant that contained God's 10 Commandments brought to Jerusalem. And so David and his entourage went to the land where Uzzah lived to bring the ark back to Jerusalem. And as they were going along, they carried it on a cart that was led by some oxen, which was not the way that God said to move the ark. And Uzzah reached out to steady the ark, and right there he was cut down. Folk, there's a lesson. There's something God is trying to teach us. Don't play around with the God of heaven. Don't mess with God's plan for your life. Don't do it. Don't take the step, because there are deadly consequences. Babylon the Great arrogantly twists the purpose of the temple cups, and they are toast. They're toast. Now, ancient Babylon did that in the days of Belshazzar, and modern Babylon the Great in Revelation chapter 17, who all the Protestant reformers declared was the papal power, the Roman Catholic Church system, just as ancient Babylon messed with God's sanctuary, so modern Babylon will do the same thing. And when she does, the party is over. The party's over. Babylon the Great will again play her tune on God's law, and she will be no more. Folk, the Bible says, Daniel chapter 5 and verse 5, in the same hour, Belshazzar's just having a great old time, partying, celebrating. In the same hour came forth fingers of a man's hand, and wrote over against the candlestick upon the plaster of the wall of the king's palace. And the king saw the part of the hand that wrote. Belshazzar didn't know where the hand came from, but there was somebody in that room that he couldn't see. And folk, everywhere we are, there's an unseen witness. Everywhere we are. The Bible says the fingers of a man's hand came from nowhere as the people are going berserk, and it starts writing on the wall. Mene, mene, tekel upharsin. The Bible says it's a fearful thing to fall into the hands of the living God. Hebrews 10:31. The uninvited guest made his presence felt. When the revelry was at its height, a bloodless hand came forth and traced upon the walls of the palace characters that gleamed like fire. Words which, though unknown to the vast throng, were a portent of doom to the now conscience-stricken king and his guests. Hushed was the boisterous mirth, while men and women, seized with nameless terror, watched the hands slowly tracing the mysterious characters. Before them passed, as in panoramic view, the deeds of their evil lives. They seemed to be arraigned before the judgment bar of the eternal God, whose power they had just defied, where but a few moments before had been hilarity and blasphemous witticism, were pallid faces and cries of fear. When God makes men fear, they cannot hide the intensity of their terror. Belshazzar was the most terrified of them all. He it was who, above all others, had been responsible for the rebellion against God, which that night had reached its height in the Babylonian realm. Prophets and Kings, page 526. You see, folks, Belshazzar lived in a city, the walls of which, actually there were two sets of walls. The walls were so thick, you could drive two Mack trucks side by side across one of the walls. They were that thick, folks. The Tigris and Euphrates rivers flowed through, actually it was the Euphrates River that flowed through Babylon. Babylon had enough storehouse of goods that would last a few decades. And even though Cyrus the Great and his army, the Medo-Persian armies, were outside the double walls of Babylon, Belshazzar felt perfectly safe. I'm the king of the greatest nation on the earth. Nobody can touch me. That's how he felt. He was untouchable. But little did Belshazzar know, Cyrus was God's man. You know, in Isaiah chapter 45, one of the most beautiful passages of all the Bible, Isaiah chapter 45. The Bible says, starting with verse 1, "Thus saith the Lord to his anointed, to Cyrus." Cyrus was God's agent, whose right hand I have holden, to subdue nations before him. I will loose the loins of kings, to open before him the two-leaved gates, and the gates shall not be shut. I will go before thee and make the crooked places straight. I will break in pieces the gates of brass and cut in sunder the bars of iron. You see, folks, the people of Babylon were so secure within the walls, the massive walls of their city. And again, there were two sets of these massive walls. The inner walls, the gates were left wide open. They were so confident, so secure. But Cyrus, he was God's man for that time. And God impressed upon him and his engineers, if you can divert the waters of the Euphrates River, if you can make a channel off of the Euphrates and make the water flow in a different place, then the water level of the Euphrates will go down and your soldiers can go under the wall of the outer walls of the city. Well, that's exactly what Cyrus did. They diverted the waters of the Euphrates. His men went underneath the first set of walls. The next walls, they were wide open. The gates were wide open. Just as Isaiah said they would be. In verse 1 it said, I will loose the loins of kings to open before him the two-leaved gates, and the gates shall not be shut. Folks, that's exactly the inner walls. The gates were not shut. I will go before thee and make the crooked places straight. Verse 4, for Jacob my servant's sake and Israel mine elect, I have even called thee by thy name. I have surnamed thee, though thou hast not known me. I am the Lord, there is none else, there is no God beside me. I girded thee, though thou hast not known me. Folk, Isaiah wrote right around 700 BC. Cyrus did this right around 540 BC. That's 160 years before Cyrus invaded Babylon. God had named him to be the deliverer of his people. And Isaiah prophesied exactly what would happen on that dreadful night in Babylon. The king's countenance was changed. His thoughts troubled him, so that the joints of his loins were loosed, his knees smote one against another. Daniel 5, verses 5 and 6. You know what? This phrase right here, the joints of his loins were loosed, his knees smote one against another. Well, that's a nice way of saying he lost control of his abilities to go to the bathroom. That's what happened. And he started going all over himself because he was scared to death. That's what happened. And that's what that means right there. The joints of his loins were loosed. He lost control of himself. In the midst of that mob, in that party hall, celebrating, he lost control because he was scared to death. Because he knew that writing on that wall from that unseen guest and those words of fire, that there was somebody there that was bigger than he was. He was urinating on himself. He was terrorized. Belshazzar was terrorized. Make no mistake, folks. When God is present somewhere, and we're carrying on our lives like there's no tomorrow, and like God doesn't exist, and we realize there's somebody bigger than we are, we're going to be terrorized too. And you know what? When a group of people get serious, really get serious about the God of heaven, when a group of people finally does that, they will terrorize this world. You realize that? We will terrorize the people of this world because they will realize that we have spent time with Jesus Christ. Calvin Coolidge, President of the United States back in the 1920s. He was a man of few words. He came home from church one Sunday and his wife asked him, "What did the preacher preach on today?" The president replied in his usual concise manner, he preached on sin. Now, Calvin Coolidge was a man of very few words. His wife asked him, "Well, what did the preacher say about sin?" And Calvin Coolidge replied, he was against it. He was against it. Belshazzar found that out, and unfortunately it was too late. It was too late for Belshazzar. Then came in all the king's wise men. The king wanted them to come in to read the writing, but they could not read the writing or make known to the king the interpretation. Then was King Belshazzar greatly troubled, and his countenance was changed in him, and his lords were astonished. But they barely recognized the man. He was beside himself. He was berserk. He was berserk. Then was Daniel brought in before the king. Now Daniel was that weird fellow. Daniel was a weird fellow. Daniel was fanatical. I know, Sister Spencer, those are absolutely insane words to use to describe that man of God. Daniel was a man who prayed. He prayed. And he studied his Bible. And what he put into his mouth and the time he got to bed, it was important to him. You know, in our modern society, if you get to bed at 9 or 9:30 at night and you don't party till all hours of the night, and you eat a correct diet, and you say, you know, I'm not going to eat late at night because it's not going to help me to sleep, and when I get up in the morning, I won't be able to hear God's voice, so no, I'm not going to eat late at night. You know, if you live like that, you're a weirdo today. Well, folks, it's about time some of us became weirdos. You know, it really is. Amen. Because our health habits are critical. They are critical to our mindset and how we will stand with our Maker. If we think, well, you know, it doesn't matter when I eat, what I eat, doesn't make any difference. Oh, yes, it does. Oh, yes, it does. And this idea of burning the midnight oil? Are you kidding me? You know, when I became a Seventh-day Adventist, no, I wasn't a Seventh-day Adventist. I was studying my Bible. I was going to a Presbyterian church, Mark. And I'd go to bed at 11 or 12 o'clock at night. And I'd get up in the morning about 6 And I'd get down on my knees and I'd start praying. And you know what would happen to me within 5 minutes? Guess what would happen within 5 minutes of being on my knees praying? What would happen to me?
Go sleep.
I'd fall asleep. And I'd wake up an hour later and I'd think, well, I guess that was a good prayer. And then I'd start reading my Bible. And within 5 minutes, guess what happened?
Fall asleep again.
I'd fall asleep again. And I'd think to myself, boy, this book is really boring, Sister Rose. This is really a boring book. And finally it dawned on me, you know, Bill, you are a dumbbell. Bill, you are crazy. The problem's not with the Bible. The problem is that you are intemperate. You are so intemperate that you think you can get to bed at all hours of the night, eat late at night, get up in the morning and pray and read, and you think you're going to stay awake? You think you're going to hear God's voice? Give me a break. You're not. And your devotion time is going to be a total wash. And when are we going to get serious? When are we going to get serious about our health habits? When are we going to do it, folks? You know, the spirit of prophecy talks about eating between meals and not eating late at night. And we look at that and we say, well, she didn't know anything. She didn't know what she was talking about. She had a 3rd grade education. How did she know anything about health? It's because God showed her. That's why. And any one of us that eats between meals today, any one of us who does that, you know exactly what happens to you. Every time you eat, the blood goes from right here, and where does it go? It goes down here to digest your food. Every time. And how does that make your brain feel? You get sluggish, don't you? That's why Sabbath afternoon, when you come back after you eat lunch and you sit in here and listen to the preacher, what do you do within 5 minutes? You start to nod off, don't you? Isn't that what happens? That's exactly what happens. Because the blood's gone from here down to here. So if I eat at 7 in the morning, oh, I'm just going to have a mid-morning snack at 10. Just some donuts and some coffee or whatever. Or even something healthy. I'm going to have a granola bar and some fruit. Doesn't matter, folks. The blood's still going from here down to here. And it's still weakening this right here. And then you come to noon and you have a good-sized meal, and then you eat mid-afternoon and you eat dinner and you have some ice cream before bed, and you wonder why you can't think and why the Bible is so boring. The problem's not with the Bible. The problem is with us. Think about your health habits, folks. And as I say those things, it hits that wall and it comes right back and it hits me. Because if health law is not important to me or to you, we might as well just pack our bags, go out and live it up like Belshazzar did, and wait for the writing on the wall, because we're destroying ourselves. We're destroying ourselves. It's time to take health seriously, folks. This man did. This man took health seriously. You know what? His prophecies turned the world spinning. And his prophecies in his book were so powerful that within a generation of his death, 5 new religions were started in the Middle East. Hinduism, Zoroastrianism, and 3 other isms. Because the devil realized if people listened to what this man wrote, they'd be ready for their Messiah. It's a fact of history, folk. This man was a man of God because he prayed and because he was serious about his health. It's time we get serious about our health too. And about prayer. Daniel was brought in before the king. The king spoke, "Are you that Daniel which are the children of the captive of Judah, whom the king my father brought out of Jewry? I've heard of thee that the spirit of the gods is in thee, that light and understanding and excellent wisdom is found in thee." Wouldn't you like for somebody to say that about you? Wouldn't you? You've got wisdom. You've got understanding that we've never seen before. The wise men, the astrologers, have been brought in before me that they should read this writing and make known to me the interpretation. But they could not show the interpretation of the thing. Worldly wise men, they don't have any answers. But those who are walking with God and are serious about health and a life of prayer, they have answers. Before that terror-stricken throng, Daniel, unmoved by the promises of the king, stood in the quiet dignity of a servant of the Most High, not to speak words of flattery, but to interpret a message of doom. Daniel's not the only one that's been given a message of doom, folk. What is the third angel's message of Revelation 14? The third angel followed them, saying with a loud voice, "If any man worship the beast and his image, and receive his mark in his forehead or in his hand, the same shall drink of the wine of the wrath of God." That's a message of doom. And this world is heading to doom. And the only people who will give the final message of doom to the world are people of prayer and people who take their health seriously. "Let thy gifts be to thyself," Daniel said. "Give thy rewards to another. Yet I will read the writing unto the king, and make known to him the interpretation." I'm not interested in your gifts. Give them to somebody else. But I will tell you the truth. That's tough, folks. That's tough. But Daniel knew who he was serving. And Daniel knew that his God would take care of him. Daniel was going to do the right thing. Daniel said, "O thou king, the Most High God, Nebuchadnezzar, thy father, gave you a kingdom, and majesty, and glory, and honor." Remember that, Belshazzar? You remember what the God of heaven did for your grandpa? Don't you remember how he mercifully dealt with your grandfather and saved him at the last? for the majesty that he gave him. All people, nations, languages trembled and feared before him. Whom he would he slew, whom he would he kept alive, whom he would he set up, whom he would he put down. When Nebuchadnezzar's heart was lifted up, his mind hardened in pride. He was deposed from his kingly throne, and they took his glory from him. He was driven from the sons of men. His heart was made like the beasts. His dwelling was with the wild asses. They fed him with grass like oxen. His body was wet with the dew of heaven, till he knew that the Most High God ruled in the kingdom of men, and that he appointeth over it whomsoever he will. And thou, his son, it's his grandson, O Belshazzar, hast not humbled thine heart, though thou knewest all this, but hast lifted up thyself against the Lord of heaven. They brought the vessels of his house before thee, and thou and thy lords, thy wives, thy concubines have drunk wine in them. And thou hast praised the gods of silver, of gold and brass and iron and wood and stone, which see not, nor hear, nor know, and the God in whose hand thy breath is, and whose are all thy ways, hast thou not glorified. And Daniel said, Belshazzar, because you forgot all the things that the God of heaven has done for you. This is the writing that was written on the wall. Mene, mene, tekel, upharsin. This is the interpretation of the thing. Meaning, God has numbered thy kingdom and finished it. Tekel, thou art weighed in the balances, and art found wanting. Peres, thy kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and the Persians. Take a long, hard look at that, folks. That means judgment. That means that God is weighing decisions. God wants to know in each of our lives, who is king? Are we the king? Are we the one who should control all our choices and decisions, even though God created and died for us? God is weighing our decisions. Belshazzar was found wanting. Belshazzar was found outside of God's will. And there was a consequence. Babylon, shattered and broken, passed away, because in prosperity its rulers had regarded themselves as independent of God and had ascribed the glory of their kingdom to human achievement. The Medo-Persian realm was visited by the wrath of heaven because in it God's law had been trampled underfoot. The fear of the Lord had found no place in the hearts of the vast majority of the people. Wickedness, blasphemy, and corruption prevailed. The kingdoms that followed were even more base and corrupt. Greece and Rome. These sank lower and lower in the scale of moral worth. The power exercised by every ruler, by the Ayatollah of Iran, by the President of the United States is heaven imparted. Upon his use of the power bestowed, his success depends. To each the word of the divine watcher is, I girded thee, though thou hast not known me. And to each the words spoken to Nebuchadnezzar of old are the lesson of life. Break off thy sins by righteousness, thine iniquities by showing mercy to the poor, if it may be a lengthening of thy tranquility. To understand these things, that righteousness exalts a nation, the throne is established by righteousness and upheld by mercy. To recognize the outworking of these principles in the manifestation of his power, who removeth kings and setteth up kings. This is to understand the philosophy of history. Tragically, on that night, Cyrus made his way under the outside walls. And as his men made their way in the Euphrates River underneath the outer walls, they looked ahead and the inner gates were wide open. And Medo-Persia went in, and that night Belshazzar was killed. And he will be lost for eternity. He was weighed in the balances, found wanting. I pray for each one of us that we will not forget how good God has been to each one of us. And I pray that we will think more seriously about our devotion time and our health habits. Let's pray.
Did Daniel escape?
Daniel escaped. Daniel escaped, and Daniel was made the third ruler. Actually, not the third. Well, he was made the third ruler in the Babylonian kingdom that night. But when Babylon fell, Daniel became a high-ranking official in the Medo-Persian kingdom. Dear Father in heaven, thank you. Thank you that you did everything you could possibly do to win Belshazzar. You tried in every way to save him from himself. He made some very stinky decisions that destroyed himself. Thank you that you've left that story on record for us. If we're making bad decisions today, if we're living intemperate lives, where we're just throwing health principles to the wind, thank you that you want to arrest us and bring us back to health, to restore our minds so we can hear your voice in prayer and in studying your word. Thank you that we still have time. Belshazzar's is over. I just pray, Father, that we would analyze our life and make sound choices so that we can hear your voice. In Christ's name I pray. Amen.